Hello everybody and welcome back to Simon's Order Academy. Today we're going to be talking about how we can use the new Stormcast Eternal models in Cities of Sigmar. And as per usual, big shout out to all the patrons that support the channel. The newest patron this week is Colin Cochran, who I've followed on Twitter for a little bit. He was a Dwarf player and then pivoted to Daughters of Cain, which I thought was weird. But you know, you definitely had your Dispossessed out at one point, and so you know, big ups to you for playing the stunties. But yeah, thank you to everyone else for supporting the channel. It's because of you guys that people get to watch videos like this, so they should all be appreciative of the support that you provide. So the Stormcast tiers video that I did last week, go back and watch it. So you can see from that one basically where my mind is at on the Stormcast Eternals units, and will give you an indication of why I'm choosing the ones to include that I choose. But it turns out that the best units in the Stormcast Battletome aren't actually the best units to run in Cities of Sigmar due to how the Stormcast Allegiance abilities work. So, which props to GW is probably good design in that respect. But at the same time, they probably accidentally did that because they kind of simplified everything down to Warscrolls, and the Allegiance abilities are a bit more threadbare than they were previously. Big example of this is the Lord-Relictor, for example, in Cities. He's really not that good. But in Stormcast, because he's got the Translocation prayer, he is straight up to A tier, so that's a pretty easy one. Vindictors as well, so again, they are quite good, and I quite like them in maybe a couple of cities, but because they don't count towards the minimum battle line, they're not as good in cities. And so I would argue that if you're going to go with Vindictors and you're going for a resilient unit, you just pay 15 points less and go with Ironbreakers. So that's kind of where I stand on that, because you know, you get 30 models on an objective instead of 15, and they've both got a natural 3-up save. You can give the dwarves a 6-up after save on a 2+ with a Rune Lord. Like, there's better things in cities basically to take. And of course, all this comes with a caveat that obviously Stardrake Guard are great in literally any list you want to put them in, because they are stupidly underpointed. And I think that's a pretty common thread amongst most content creators that know what they're talking about, except for Shilly. We'll ignore what he says. He just says what GW tell him to. But yeah, it's those models, once they go out, are obviously going to sell out almost immediately, because they're at a price point, like a cost point, where they can slot into any Cities of Sigmar list, and they're going to be amazing. I'll probably do an individual video on them, but it's going to be fairly similar to my video on Bundo in, you know, all the different cities. They're just, you can just buff them in so many different ways, and make them great. And so I think the main difference between why Cities is so strong now with the Stormcast release is that they have strong Warscroll abilities and Warscroll utility, but they don't have the Allegiance abilities really to back them up and make them super strong. And that's where Cities shines. All of our cities have, all of our Strongholds of Order have different Allegiance abilities that make them great. And so you can buff things in different ways and have different combos in different cities, which is, you know, obviously great. So yeah, the units that I've included in the following slides are not necessarily the best, but they are good, or they have some sort of niche interaction that I quite enjoy, which is to try and encourage people to be creative with list writing. So if you haven't found, you know, a combination that you like with the model that you like, and it's not mentioned in this video, just reach out and just say to me, hey, where would you include this unit? So either, like, this will be in the Facebook groups, this will be on YouTube. Either put it in the YouTube comments or put it in, you know, on the Twitter or on the Facebook comment section, and I'll tell you where I think it's best. There are some units that I don't think are worth taking in any lists in cities, but you know, as people are probably well aware now, I'm fairly upfront with my opinions and not ashamed to tell them. So just ask the question, and just make sure that you know your rules before you do, because they're based on that tier list. There are a couple of people that were disagreeing with my tier list who hadn't actually read the Stormcast book. So I kind of expect a little bit of homework to be done if you're going to disagree with me and kind of engage in discussion, unless you're a new player, in which case, you know, ask away. And yeah, so I think just the new Battletome brings lots of new list building options to cities, for the points mentioned previously. Alright, so the first unit that we are going to talk about is the Dracothian Guard Fulminators. So these guys are got a significant buff in the Stormcast Eternals book. So they're 230 points for 2, which is a bit of a weird number, but they've always come in 2 in the kit. So the best thing about these guys is that they have, well, they start with a 3+ arm save, so that's obviously amazing. They're relatively fast. They've got a 10-inch move, which we don't have a whole lot of good cavalry in cities, and so a 10-inch move is quite significant for them. They have a primary weapon, which is 5 attacks, 3s and 3s, Rend 2, damage 1, but when you charge, it's damage 3. So that's where their main strength comes from. A single Fulminator has 15 points of Rend 2 damage on the charge, so 2 of them has 30 points of Rend 2 damage, which is just absolutely insane for the output that you're getting. And then you also get claws on top of that, which is 6 points of damage at Rend 2 per that's not how maths, yeah, per unit of 2. Is that how maths works? That's how maths works. Let's go with that. And they've also got a ranged mortal output, which is it's not as good as it used to be. That changed between the 2nd edition Battle Tome and the 3rd edition. So previously you could buff that hit roll. You can't buff it anymore. It's just on a 4+, but that's completely fine. Elite's actually really good on them. So because they can issue commands to themselves, it means you don't need to keep a character close to them, and they can go off and do their own thing because they don't actually have a nominated leader in the unit of 2. And they're just a really solid unit. They've got 6 wounds each, so they count as 2 models on an objective. I'm a really big fan of Fulminators, and they might even potentially compete with Stardrake Guard in some circumstances. Very small, but some circumstances. So yeah, that sums up my first point. Fulminators are now amazing. Now, putting them in temper size. So I've chosen basically one city for each of the units that I want to talk about, which I think accentuates their strengths. So in temper size, you are able to move them an extra 3 inches in the first turn, so they go to move 13. They can get the Gur Battle Mages wild form buffing them for +2 to run and charge, and so with that you should be able to get into most targets in turn 1, because you're generally going to be starting between 18 and 22 inches apart in most of the battle plans that you're playing. And so all that really means is that, you know, you're going to need, on the 18 ones, you're going to need a 3-inch charge to get in. It seems pretty good. On the 22-inch ones, you're going to need a, 7-inch charge. With a reroll, they can issue commands themselves, really good. In temper size, you also have a 2+ armor save on the first turn. So if you take the alpha and you hit them hard with the Fulminators first turn, you are on a 2-up armor save coming back, and all out defense them to a 1-up. So you should be able to reduce the amount of wounds that are coming back at you in turn 1. Obviously turn 2 onwards it changes the equation, but turn 1 these guys are really strong. There are a number of command traits, artifacts and spells in the City Allegiance abilities to support the combat units. So Aetherguard Captain gives you +1 to charge when you're near him. Zephyr Banner gives it reroll charges when you're near him, and by near I mean wholly within 12. And then Aura of Glory gives them +1 attack. And then +1 attack on a model that has 2 profiles, one of which is damage 3 and one of which is damage 2, is really solid. And so I actually quite like a Battle Mage on Griffin in temper size to support these guys in their attack. Basically because you get not only the +2 to run and charge, but you can also, if you put an Arcane Tome or something on him, do Aura of Glory as well, which is really good on the unit, especially when you got 4 of them. Like that's significantly more output just for that one spell. And yeah, because they can go in and hold things in combat, even if they're not fighting at their full profile of 3 damage, the Claws and Fangs from the Dracoth are still doing significant damage, and they're still all Rend 2 damage 1. So while you're tying stuff up, it's giving your Iron Drakes time to get up the board and to, you know, put damage downrange onto units that you've engaged in combat. So yeah, Dracothian Guard, I'm a real big fan, and I think that they are going to be a strong unit choice in cities going into 3rd edition. Celestant Prime's the next one. The city that I've chosen for him is Misthaven, but I've put it at the bottom, but obviously he's still amazing in Hammerhall, and that's probably where I would run him if I had a choice between the two. However, because for the purposes of this, I've also got a Misthaven list that I'm running him in, and I think he's actually quite good there as well. He just does it. He's just not as buffed as well in Misthaven as he is in Hammerhall, but we'll talk about that when we get to Hammerhall, because it's basically the combat army. And everyone's by now seen the list that I ran at CanCon 2020, let's say 2020, pre-COVID. And, you know, it's obviously just better now because Celestant Prime's got a 4-up board. The rest of the list is basically the same. It's a really strong list. was good in 2nd edition, still good in 3rd edition. So Celestant Prime is an amazing model. So he's got a 3-up armor save, he moves 12, he's got 8 wounds, and he's now got a 4+ ward save, which is huge for him, and what I was honestly hoping for. Actually, I was actually hoping that they were going to make Galmoraz like damage 4 or 5 as well. They didn't do that. But he's really solid still. So his Comet Strike Scepter used to be D6 inches, and then you had to roll a dice to see if things suffered mortal wounds. Now it's just anything, you pick a point within 24 inches of him, and then every enemy unit within 3 inches of that point suffers D3 mortal wounds. A lot of times you'd roll a 1, and you'd say, I'm going to choose 1 away from this model, and you know, you wouldn't get anything else. But just knowing that it's a 3 is actually better, and it's just D3 mortal wounds. So I'm a fan of the Comet Strike Scepter change. One of the big things that he does, obviously, is he charges up and gets extra attacks when you keep him off the battlefield. We all know about that. But Orrery of the Celestial Fates is interesting, because previously you could roll the dice and then choose to change it. What you have to do now is that you actually have to change it before you roll the dice, and you basically just say, I'm going to make it a 12. So you don't get to roll the dice, try and hit that 9, and then spend your dice roll choice on the save roll that turn or on a hit roll that turn. You have to choose the charge roll that turn. So I think that's probably a good. It's a good change. It's a good change. So in Misthaven, what did I say about him? Did I say everything? I think I said everything. He's got 3 attacks. He gets an extra 2 every turn he stays off the board, and they've kind of cleared up the wording of that as well, so it works properly, which is good. So, Misthaven itself has a predisposition to Deep Strike. A lot of the lists that I run have a Drake's, what's his name? Dreadlord on Black Dragon, who Deep Strikes and then uses the Shadow Lord thing to bring in some Drake Spawn cavalry. Celestant Prime supports that because he doesn't need models on the board to go off the board, and so you've got 4 Deep Striking units essentially in the list. Because narcotics are an allegiance ability and not identified as enhancements, and the only caveat for them is that you can take 1 for every artifact of power that you have. You can, if you really wanted, you could double Warlord and take 3 narcotics, but I think you only want to take 2 most of the time. The 2 that I think Celestant Prime benefits most from are Sinisthalcum or the Witch Mist. So Sinisthalcum is until your next hero phase +1 to hit, which is good, and Witch Mist is until your next. Oh, that one. Actually, I'm just going to double check that. I feel like that one might actually just be that phase that it keeps you ethereal. But if you hold on, no, I don't want the Daughters of Cain book. If you just hold on, I will tell you. Until your next hero phase, ignore modifiers and making save rolls. So really strong, 3-up unrendable save and then a 4-up ward afterwards until your next hero phase. If you're expecting to get doubled, it's really strong to use that. And then finally, the third one is the Skiffer's Salve. I haven't put it on here, but it's heal D6 wounds allocated to him, which is really, obviously now that he's got a 4-up ward, every wound that you heal is basically 2 that you're healing. And so if you roll a 5 or a 6, you're healing 10 or 12 wounds, like really strong. You have to use them in your hero phase, just as a caveat. You can't just trigger them as opposed to the opponent, but really strong. Yeah, he's just a really strong option, and I think that people should be getting out the Celestant Primes. He's 325 points, which I think is pretty solid, and I think that he potentially is better than Indrasta now, and that's something that I've kind of been working through myself, because previously I was quite a fan of Indrasta, but now I think Celestant Prime is, now that he's got a 4+ ward and he's only 5 points extra, I think he's the better option than her. Alright, so next one is the Lord-Celestant on Stardrake. So a lot of people are down on this guy. He's 500 points, so he is literally a quarter of your army if you're going to be taking him, but I still quite like him. So, and I've played him a bit, and so I think that has to come with the caveat that you need to take the Amulet of Destiny on him, because if you don't take that Amulet of Destiny, I think that his utility is significantly reduced. He also combos well with the Lord Arcanum, so I just want to point out this combo that, or it works with any hero, but it's probably best with the Lord-Celestant on Stardrake, is that Archaon, when he goes in and tries to put people in the sword, let's say he's in Zench, so he takes his 2 6s from his Destiny dice pool, because that's fair, and uses them to auto-kill your dragon. The Cycle of the Storm ability is now worded appropriately, so that what happens when you count as slain, the Cycle of the Storm triggers, you're not counter slain and you heal 1. So basically it turns off things like Hand of Dust, and it turns off things like, I don't know what the ability is called, putting them in the sword, whatever Archaon does. I think that changes up the matchup and actually makes this guy really strong if you have that combo. I would highly recommend the Lord Arcanum on Griff Charger. Great model, can teleport anywhere on the board. Super big fan of that model. But yeah, 18 wounds with a 3+ armor save is amazing. His move is yeah, it's okay. It starts at 12 and degrades to an 8 on the lowest profile. I think you always take the Celestant Hammer over the Stormbound Blade because you've got a 2 rend weapon as opposed to a 1 rend weapon. And the dragon itself is also pretty good. The Sweeping Tail changed. I think it's better now. I don't like random attack profiles. That just annoys me. There's no need. I feel like there's no need for it in the game anymore. If they just made that a 3, I think I'd be happier with it than it being a D6. But you know, it's better than before where you just did D3 mortal wounds. So I think it's better than that. And they changed Rain of Stars to a shooting attack, which is really good. So because we're taking him in Living City for the purposes of this slide, he is able to, because Rain of Stars is a missile attack and it has a profile, you're able to move in your movement phase, shoot in your shooting phase. Because you've shot with a missile weapon, it triggers strike and fade away, so he can move a further 12 and then he can charge. So basically he's going 24 inches in the first turn and charging into your opponent's army, which is really strong. If anyone's seen what Maw Crushers do now, you'll understand. And you know, his main point of contention, and he heals one wound every turn with Living City Allegiance ability, which is really good, especially when you got that 5+ ward save. Essentially, you know, every 3 wounds, is that how it works? Every 3 wounds that you heal, you get a 4th one? Yeah, buy 3, get 1 for free, sounds good. You can also heal him. They've got it, there's healing spells in Living City, which is it Life Bloom? I think it's Life Bloom. That might be a Lariel's thing. Anyway, whatever the healing spell is called, heal D6 wounds on him within 18 inches. That's really strong on the Stardrake, man. He does compete with the Anointed on Frostheart, who's 315 points as compared to this guy's 500. But the fact that he can shoot, move, charge, I think, and he's got obviously significantly more output in melee with Ren 2 attacks instead of Ren 1 attacks. I think that he's potentially better than the dude on Anointed on Frostheart. But famous last words, because that's one of the best monster models in the game. Also, I guess that's another thing to mention. He's a monster, so he can do the monstrous battle tactics, which is big in the current edition. And yet the Stardrake model still looks absolutely amazing, and having one on the table is always fun, and it's always good to move it around. It's on gigantic base, like it makes you, it feels really, he feels really strong now. And I'm just going to mention a couple of other things about him. So the Arcane Lineage, which gives him +1 to cast on your models and -1 to cast on enemy wizards, is also really good because you want him to be in combat. So you should be up there giving everything -1 to cast, because it's within 18. So it's basically your opponent's entire army if you're in there. Unless you play Khorne, which I did the other day with him, but it's fine. The Cavernous Jaws, obviously the utility of this has gone up in 3rd edition because you can actually bite out command models. And so one of the best ways to do this is actually just to eat the unit leader, so they can't issue command abilities to themselves. And so if they're not within range of a hero, they're just going to run to Battle Shock. And so you can eat them, you can eat the Musician, you can eat the Banner Bearer. Usually on a 2-up or a 3-up is really strong. But this guy can actually go into 5-win characters as well and eat them. Because you can, if they're a 5-win model, you just go in, you roll 3 dice. If one of them's a 6, you've just killed that 5-win character immediately. No saves, no ward saves, no nothing. Get in the stomach. Get in my belly. Yeah, and that's it. And he gets a free command ability to a Stormcast Eternals unit once a game, which is fine. He just issues it to himself, and he probably just does all that defense. So, yeah, I think he makes back his 500 points, and I think he's worth taking, particularly in Living City. All right, I'm sure that literally nobody is surprised about me talking about taking Krondys in Hallerheart. What a surprise. We took a magician in Hallerheart, like mind-boggling stuff. So he compares potential. So you essentially, I did run that list where I ran Bundo, and you know, Bundo's 490 points, this guy's 600. So you're spending another 100 points essentially to get this guy. He's got half the wounds of Bundo. He's got 1 better armor save, and his movement characteristic is like 2 inches more. Maybe it's 3 inches more, I can't remember. His output is, I would say, comparable to Bundo as well. Depending what you're fighting. Obviously, if your opponent's is stupid enough to put a hero next to a unit of 20 infantry models, obviously you're going to make them pay for that. But he's got a lot of output for a mage. 4 attacks, 3s and 1s, Ren 2 damage 3, 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 2 damage 2, and then the amount of attacks of the number of models within 3 inches of you, 3s and 3s, Ren 2 damage 2. He's an absolute beast in combat. His missile attack always does mortal wounds, even if you roll a 1, and combos well with the Hurricanum that you got on the table. So you're basically doing, like, on average 4d3 mortal wounds to something within 18 inches of your castle. And he can support the Iron Drakes in a Hallowed Heart list, which you should be running. I know people disagree, but you should be running 30 Iron Drakes in Hallowed Heart, and he can really push up with them and support them, different to how the Hurricanum's able to do the same thing. So yeah, cast spells, which will obviously get the buff of the Arcane Channeling, so it means that you'll be casting his Warscroll spell, Atavistic Tempest, on between a 2 and 6, depending on what you roll on Arcane Channeling. And when you have the Flash Freezing Blizzard option, which is -1 to save rolls, and you combine that with the Iron Drake's -2 rend, the Iron Drakes are essentially shooting at -3 rend with 60 shots, 2s and 2s, like amazing. You can see you can give him Seer Wounds so that he can heal himself if he's up on the front line. Mostly so take Emerald Life Swarm in as well, which will heal him for another 2d3. He's a good target for Mystic Shield and Warding Brand. He's a really strong model, and he's a monster that you normally wouldn't have in Hallowed Heart as well, because you're not typically taking the Battle Mage on Griffin. You're typically taking a Hurricanum. And obviously the exceptions to that with Bundo, but I'm pretty keen to try it with Krondys as well, because I think he's a really strong option and a really flavorful option as well. I think that anybody that has bought this model and has a Hallowed Heart list, you should just stick him into the Hallowed Heart list and see how he goes, because I think he's a super strong option, and he's going to look like an amazing model on the table. Good old Hammer Hall. So the next one we're going to talk about is Protectors. So with this combo has the caveat of that you need to take it with a Knight Vexillor with the Pennant. No, not the Pennant, Stormbringer. What's it called? Maybe it is that one. It's the one that teleports them. Everybody knows what one I'm talking about, except for me. Vexillor. Oh my god, it is Pennant of the Stormbringer. I know what I'm talking about. It's amazing. Yeah, so when you have them in your lines, basically, you give them the Wild Form spell, you give them Wings of Fire, you teleport them 9 inches away from something, they need a 6-inch charge with a reroll. Pretty good odds. It's like 80-something%. Pretty good. And then in Hammerhall, because you are probably going to be taking a Frostheart Phoenix, you can give them +1 to hit from the Twinstone Akshi. You should have, depending on how many points you've spent, you may have Inspiring for +1 to wound, and you will likely have Blood of the 12 command trait to get reroll 1s to wound, which means if you combo all that stuff together, each of the Protectors has 5 attacks, 2s to hit, 2s to wound, reroll 1s to wound, -2 rend, and damage 1. And then you spend a command point on them to make them fight again, and they just do it again. So each model essentially has 10 attacks, which is really good. Your Soul Scream, Soul something maces, Star Soul. Let's go with Star Soul. Star Soul maces get to fight twice as well, which means that you're just throwing out more mortal wounds than you probably should be in a turn. And it should, because they're 3 wounds each and have a 2-up armor save, whatever they've gone into, you should have plenty left, basically, out of the 10 that you've sent in, because you can't reinforce them because they're not battle line. Star Soul mace, that's what they're called. It means that you can essentially, you should be fighting with them twice, because there should be models left over, a 2+ armor save, 3 wounds each. You should have a pretty good chance of getting through whatever your opponent's got to chuck back at you, even if you're just keeping the Star Soul maces to fight twice and finish something off. That's really good. So I ran a similar combo with them back in 2nd edition. I had 15 of them instead of 10, I believe. They did a lot of work, essentially. I bought these guys originally to put them in I mentioned it previously, I still can't remember the name of it, the battalion that allowed them to deep strike 5 inches away, and you needed to take a unit of paladins, and they got buffs to do so. I really like these guys. The models are cool, they've made them better now. Potentially you would want to take Retributors instead. However, I don't think the Retributors are as good as these guys, because Retributors only have a 1-inch range, whereas these guys have a 3-inch range. And so that's why I'm a big fan of these guys. And in Hammerhall particularly, you get, you know, that combo with the Vexler, and you get all of the +1 to run and charge spells. You should be able to get these guys into whatever you want to get them into. And that's pretty key, because they are only a 4-inch move unit. You are only relocating them once per game as well. So if you give your opponent first and they come at you in the first turn, and you don't burn your Pennant of the Stormbringer, you've got options for later on in the game. And yeah, these are a nice fun unit, and I would recommend people play with them. And then finally, this isn't really a big brain combo, this one. I just wanted to try and sneak something in for Greywater Fastness. I have identified a list that I want to play in Greywater Fastness with this guy. Essentially, whenever a new book drops, I always look to see what I can put Dwarden munitions on to make that model +1 range damage. And I think that this is the guy. So previously I put it on the Knight Venator to make him damage 2. It didn't do a whole lot. He was Rend 1. He didn't do anything. It was trash. He's even worse now. So if he was bad in the previous edition and he's worse now, just you can tell how devastated about that I am. So the combo in Greywater Fastness you can do with this guy is that you have the Drill Master command trait, which is reroll 1s to hit with missile weapons, and you have a Hurricanum as well. Both of those should already be in any Greywater list that you run. You can make the Knight-Judicator, have his 2 shots. He's hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 2s, -3 rend and 4 damage, because the runic munitions give your shots +1 damage, so he goes from damage 3 to damage 4. And there'll obviously be a number of games where he would just miss killing a 5-wound character, but if you've got any characters that basically have 6+ wound models, or you've got you're shooting them into a unit as well, which is also an option, you can be killing 8 models from that unit. So it's really good at taking out screens, for example, if you've got stuff that wants to charge, which you're Greywater Fastness, so you probably don't have anything you want to charge. You just want to kind of absorb the attacks that they're doing. But I do have a Greywater Fastness list that I want to run that's got this guy and 6 Vanguard Raptors with long strikes in it, because obviously they become 2s reroll 1s as well. It's just a lot of ranged output that I think is really strong, because everyone likes shooting, right? It's the shooting meta. Get excited, people. There's more guns to come. So thank you everyone for watching. This Stormcast book has got me pretty excited for list building at the moment. There's lots of new and varied options for your Cities of Sigmar armies as a result of this book coming out, and I think it's a great opportunity to dive in, get yourself some shiny boys, and put them into your armies, because there are some good synergies that they have being a coalition unit, and with us being able to take 1 in 4 of them to kind of augment the Cities of Sigmar, which the models are getting a bit outdated. So if you can always buy new models to spruce your army up, it's never a bad idea. And with that great segue, I'm partnered up with Just Play Games in the UK, so if you feel like purchasing some models, I'll have all the ones that I've listed in this video at the bottom in the description, so you can click on the link and basically go and grab that model. Obviously Krondys isn't there yet because Krondys isn't out, but once Krondys is out, you should probably grab him anyway. It's going to be an amazing model. Avoid those Dracothian Guard, the Stormdrake Guard. You don't need them. They're going to go up in points anyway in December, so it's fine. But thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to speak to you all again in the next week.